On July 25, 1991, Michael Landon died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 54. Not long before that, he stood before a national television audience, looked death straight in the eye, and said simply, "I may win or lose. I accept either." No self-pity, no concealment. America froze, because the man who had taught them about family, hope, and forgiveness was leaving faster than any ending he had ever written for his characters. That death did not merely close a career. It tore apart the familiar image tens of millions of viewers had trusted for 3 decades. On screen, Michael Landon was the ideal father, the moral center of American television. Off-screen, he was a man driven forward by a fear of failure, a need for control, losses that were never fully resolved, and an immense pressure called having to be right. This story does not stop at success. It descends into the parallel contradictions that coexisted within one person. Extraordinary talent paired with an obsession with power. Stories that healed the public set against fractures within his own family. A rare, enduring career running alongside a constant sense of never being safe enough. This is a journey to decipher why Michael Landon became a pillar of American television, and why the price he paid for that position was so heavy. If you remember him only as a warm symbol, you have seen only half the truth. That moment of facing death was not the beginning of the tragedy. It was simply the first time the public clearly saw something that had followed Michael Landon his entire life. An outward calm concealing a deeply fractured foundation. To understand how he could stand so upright at the edge of the end, one must go much further back, to the years when that strength was not a choice, but the only way to survive. Michael Landon was born in 1936 under the name Eugene Maurice Orowitz, growing up in a household where tension was never the exception. Carrying Jewish heritage within often unforgiving communities, he became a target for bullying at an early age. That repeated hostility did not produce a fragile child. Instead, it cultivated a quiet anger, a compressed energy waiting to erupt in another direction. His father, Eli Orowitz, was not cruel, but his weakness and helplessness in the face of domestic conflict gradually reduced him to a faint presence. An unstable career as a publicist, erratic income, a professional identity dependent on others, all contributed to a father who was physically present but absent in authority. To the young Landon, this was the image of a man unable to protect his family or even himself. In stark contrast stood his mother, Peggy O'Neill. She had once tasted the stage lights, but her career stalled, leaving behind a long-lasting bitterness. Within the household, her emotions frequently overflowed, transforming into subtle forms of control and humiliation. Landon grew up constantly on guard, never knowing when an outburst might occur. The family was in perpetual conflict. Endless arguments, accumulated tension, and the experience of a child becoming an invisible outlet for anger forced Landon to retreat early. The household atmosphere, dominated by emotional eruptions and psychological abuse, deprived his childhood of any basic sense of safety. Silence became a reflex. Imagination became an escape. He withdrew into his inner world, beginning to envision another version of himself, independent, self-sufficient, and controlled by no one. A humiliating experience in Los Angeles sealed that resolve. When his father attempted to use personal connections to secure his son a chance at a film studio, they did not even make it past the gate. That cold rejection did more than close a door. It shut down any notion of privilege. From that point on, Landon chose absolute self-reliance. No favors, no borrowed influence, no debts of gratitude. It was in this context that sports emerged as a rare refuge, one that required no explanations, no self-definition. In javelin throwing, Michael Landon found a sense of order absent from his family life. Force transferred cleanly, a clear trajectory, results measured in distance rather than emotion. He trained with near-obsessive focus, and his talent surfaced quickly enough to earn him an athletic scholarship to the University of Southern California. For a boy raised amid instability, this was not merely admission to college. It was the first sign that his body could open doors that words could not. But the new environment did not bring the release he had imagined. At USC, Landon again faced bullying, this time more refined yet no less cruel. Competitive pressure, performance expectations, and a sense of isolation piled up, until a serious training injury abruptly cut off any long-term plans. The arm that had once been his anchor became his limitation. The Olympics. Dream. Something that had allowed him to feel he could outrun his past, collapsed quietly, without ceremony, leaving behind a void difficult to name. Leaving school, Landon had no protective network to lean on. He entered manual labor with a cold acceptance, babysitting for small change, working long shifts at a soup factory, then moving on to a ribbon factory with a rhythm so steady it became numbing. Each job was simple, repetitive, nameless, but demanded punctuality, endurance, and responsibility even when no one was watching. In those years, Landon learned to survive through personal discipline, carrying an insistent need to prove his worth in whatever position he occupied. From that silent, grinding routine, another path began to form, not loudly, but solid enough to pull him forward. The repetitive rhythm of the ribbon factory offered no status, but it placed Michael Landon in a chance situation powerful enough to pivot his life. One day, he agreed to accompany a coworker to an audition, simply to help and get it over with. He arrived without ambition, with no intention of entering Hollywood. What happened in that room was not an instant explosion, but a chillingly familiar sensation. For the first time in years, he felt allowed to exist without having to stay on guard. Acting in its own quiet way granted him the right to reconstruct himself, without recounting the past, simply by controlling the moment. Still needing to earn a living, Landon adopted a coldly pragmatic survival strategy, working at a gas station near Warner Brothers, not out of fantasy, but to stay close to where opportunity might pass by. That patience paid off when an executive noticed him and advised him to pursue formal acting training. Days were spent working, nights learning the craft, entering classrooms where technique, discipline, and endurance were valued above inspiration. There, he understood that if he could not rely on connections, he would rely on durability. Changing his name to Michael Landon, randomly selected from a telephone directory, was not a gimmick. It was a deliberate severing, setting aside Eugene Horowitz and the insecurities bound to childhood, stepping forward with a name unburdened by memory. The years that followed were a succession of small roles and rejections. His face became familiar in waiting rooms, but not enough to stay. Each missed role became another test of persistence, the same persistence he had forged during long factory shifts and unseen injuries. In 1957, I Was a Teenage Werewolf arrived as an unexpected jolt. A low-budget B-movie with modest means and no promise of great acclaim, yet its portrayal of a troubled, repressed teenager erupting in distorted ways aligned uncannily with Landon's inner life. The character's tension required no embellishment. It surfaced through his lean frame, direct gaze, and a performance rhythm that did not pander to the audience. The positive response pulled his name out of obscurity, opening the first real door, not through glamour, but because he proved he could place anxiety on screen while still maintaining control. That door had barely opened when 1959 placed Michael Landon into a role that transformed his entire standing. Little Joe Cartwright, the fiery youngest son of the Cartwright family, was more than a character. It was where Landon poured the compressed energy of his youth. When Bonanza aired, audiences quickly recognized a different rhythm in Little Joe. Young, fast, direct, free of moral lecturing. The series became the first color Western television show to achieve mass success, dominating NBC's ratings for years and running for 431 episodes. Landon's face appeared steadily in America's living rooms. That familiarity did not come from spectacle, but from the sense that he was there every week, stable, recognizable, trustworthy. Success accelerated just as his private life fractured. That same year, 1959, his father died suddenly of a heart attack. There was no time for pause. Landon continued filming while arranging the funeral, assuming financial responsibility for his mother and younger sister. The fear of dying young seeped into daily life, driving him to work at ever-increasing intensity, as if each season might be his last. On set, Little Joe remained the unyielding young man. Off-set, Landon learned to regulate tempo, control schedules, and prevent emotion from derailing work, a survival reflex sharpened by the weight of family responsibility. Once his position was secure, Landon's ambition shifted form. In the late 1960s, he moved into writing and directing, not to chase new fame, but to command the full trajectory of the story. Scripts were read with a demanding eye. Every beat, every line of dialogue was questioned. This approach produced consistent results on screen while generating friction with other writers. From the outside, he appeared unyielding. From within, it was a refusal to allow deviation, because a failed episode meant losing control in front of tens of millions of viewers. The heaviest blow came in 1972. Dan Blocker, the pillar of Bonanza as Hoss Cartwright, died suddenly from surgical complications. His absence left a void no script adjustment could fill. The working atmosphere sagged. Filming days carried the weight of a missing anchor. Landon, often the one who used humor to steady the group, now used that same humor as armor against grief, a familiar habit when facing loss. The series continued for another season, but the engine had changed. The emotional weight no longer allowed it to run as before. When Bonanza ended shortly thereafter, Landon emerged with two forces running in parallel: national stature and an acute awareness of creative power. On one side stood an image deeply imprinted in public memory. On the other, a desire to personally shape the next story, refusing to let it drift on inertia. That tension between audience trust and self-imposed pressure prepared him for a bolder transition ahead, where he would not only stand before the camera but determine the entire world behind it. The tension between a national beloved image and a desire for control found its proper arena when Michael Landon entered Little House on the Prairie. From the very first 2-hour pilot, he was not merely in front of the camera as Charles Ingalls. He served as the architect of the entire world of the series, executive producer, principal writer, director of roughly 90 of the 204 episodes, and the guiding hand behind both the opening and the final installments. That authority was never showy. It revealed itself in a steady narrative rhythm, in a moral axis that allowed no drift, and in the ability to make a simple family story resonate with a mass audience. The result was a durable phenomenon: 9 seasons, 3 television films, global syndication in more than 140 countries, and peak seasons drawing over 20 million viewers per episode. Numbers sufficient to turn Walnut Grove into a familiar place for an entire generation. The way Landon ran the set mirrored his working philosophy. He often accepted the first take if the emotional rhythm was right, rather than extending shoots in search of formal perfection. Jokes and a family-like atmosphere helped the cast, especially the younger actors, endure a demanding production schedule. Alongside that warmth, however, was strict control over content. Stories had to hold to a moral spine. Conflicts could be harsh, but they could not betray core values. That consistency became the series' strength, while also placing Landon in the role of final decision-maker, a position that inevitably carried friction. With the younger cast members, relationships went beyond contractual professionalism. Landon became a hybrid figure, father, teacher, and protector, to Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson, drawing both families closer outside of filming. Shared trips and ordinary offset moments deepened the sense of home the series sought to convey. That closeness also meant that when fractures appeared, they cut deeper. His relationship with Cindy Clerico did not merely disrupt his private life. It shocked a collective that had come to see him as a moral anchor. Melissa Gilbert was deeply hurt. The years-long distance that followed between them became the clearest rupture between public image and private reality. One collision no script could soften. By the 9th season, change did not arrive as an abrupt turn, but as the result of years spent observing the series' own internal rhythm. The new structure, titled A New Beginning, was built with a clear intent, gradually shifting focus away from Charles Ingalls and the original generation, making room for an adult Laura, married, independent, and living a life no longer centered on the old family home. For Landon, this was not merely a narrative tweak, but a matter of storytelling logic. A character who was now a wife, bearing her own responsibilities, could not continue to be written as a daughter returning home for paternal guidance without undermining credibility. At the same time, audience numbers reflected a natural decline after many consecutive years on air. The appeal remained, but it was no longer at its peak. The restructuring was therefore professional rather than emotional, preserving fidelity to the character's lived reality instead of extending the series by habit. The decision to end the show reached its climax with the last farewell, a choice that stunned audiences: the complete destruction of the town of Walnut Grove. On the surface, it was an unprecedentedly dramatic act for a family series known for its healing tone. In practical terms, it stemmed from a land lease clause in Newhall, California. The set had to be returned to its original condition once filming ended, and demolition expedited the cleanup. Yet the way Landon integrated this necessity into the story transformed an administrative requirement into a creative declaration. The town was not taken away by an outside force. It was dismantled by the community itself, after its people had departed with their memories and values intact. That world was not left standing as an empty backdrop for other stories, because to Landon, if its original soul was gone, it had no reason to exist. Speculation that the act was retaliatory, punishment for a sudden cancellation, quickly lost credibility when Landon continued working with NBC on subsequent projects. What remained after the dust of the final explosion settled was the sense of an era closed on the creator's own terms. No compromise with inertia, no extension out of nostalgia, no permission for his legacy to become an empty set. That was how Michael Landon left Little House on the Prairie, entirely consistent with the path he had followed all along. After the decisive closing of Walnut Grove, Michael Landon did not leave television. He changed his voice. Highway to Heaven emerged as a deliberate shift, less nostalgic, more direct in confronting why people lose their way and how they might stand up again. Landon played Jonathan Smith while also producing, writing, and directing. A familiar structure, but with a different aim. Instead of a tight-knit family and enclosed community, the stories followed scattered lives and temporary stops along the road. Morality and faith were not preached from a pedestal, but placed within concrete circumstances and allowed to reveal themselves. The early seasons received positive responses. Audiences still found what they trusted in Landon: a clear narrative rhythm, emotion without cynicism, healing that did not demand justification. The series earned nominations and honors in family television categories, reinforcing Landon's standing as a storyteller with a distinct signature. But American television was changing. The 1980s were turning toward urban settings, sharper conflict, faster pace, and rougher edges. Stories that whispered began to be drowned out by the louder voices of the era. Highway to Heaven kept its identity, yet that very steadfastness gradually put it out of sync with the mainstream. That misalignment was not driven by taste alone. Along the way, Landon faced another intimate loss. Victor French, his close co-star, died of cancer after a brief diagnosis. The pain did not end with death. It brought a belated recognition of the cost of alcoholism, a spiral Landon had witnessed in many around him. On screen, episodes about forgiveness and second chances continued to air. Off-screen, he looked squarely at the fragility of the body and of time, an anxiety that had haunted him since his father's death. That parallel deepened the show's tone. Fewer miracles, more silence, and the sense that healing, if it came at all, always carried a price. When the series ended in 1989, Landon remained at the center of creative authority, but the atmosphere had shifted. Television was no longer waiting for slow, reflective stories. He did not try to chase it. Instead, he persisted in holding to a moral rhythm that had shaped him from the beginning, a rhythm that both supported the audience and exposed the inescapable limits of the storyteller himself. The final years of Highway to Heaven did more than reveal the fatigue of a storyteller confronting television's new rhythm. They also echoed a pattern that had appeared very early in Michael Landon's life: the search for family as a refuge, followed by the realization that he did not know how to remain at rest within it. That pattern began with his first marriage, to Dodie Levy-Fraser. They met when Landon was still unknown, living precariously between acting classes and temporary jobs to make ends meet. Dodie was significantly older, more experienced, carrying the presence of a guide rather than that of a conventional romantic partner. To Landon at the time, Dodie represented a rare form of stability. Someone who believed in him when he had nothing, a space calm enough for him to briefly set down the defenses forged in childhood. Their bond formed quietly, but it quickly became an emotional anchor during the years when he was still standing outside Hollywood's gates. They married in 1956, when Landon was barely in his 20s. The marriage took place before Bonanza, before fame, before creative authority. The couple chose to adopt 2 sons, Mark and Josh, as a way of building a family on their own terms. In the early years, Landon tried to fulfill the role of a young husband under the pressure of survival and an as-yet unformed professional ambition. Dodie, with her experience and strong personality, often took charge of organizing domestic life, a role that was both necessary and quietly created an imbalance in agency. As Landon's career began to accelerate, the rhythm of family life gradually slipped out of balance. Long work hours, repeated absences for auditions, and an ever-thickening web of commitments created distance without the need for accusation. Landon carried an urge to move forward at any cost. Dodie faced the feeling of being left behind in a race she had never signed up to run. Responsibility for 2 children added further strain to a relationship already fragile because of age differences and mismatched life stages. The pain did not erupt into dramatic conflict. It spread instead as prolonged exhaustion. They lived beside one another while sharing less and less of the same rhythm. Landon did not know how to slow down. Dodie could no longer remain the sole point of support. The marriage ended in 1962, leaving behind 2 children and a quiet lesson. A family does not automatically become a safe place simply because one longs for it. For Landon, the collapse did not turn him away from marriage. It pushed him into the next relationship with both the belief that he could do better and the fear that if he stopped moving, everything would fall apart again. That first rupture did not make Michael Landon retreat from the idea of family. It drove him to seek a different structure, one in which youthful uncertainty might be replaced by a sense of long-term stability. During the period when Bonanza was expanding its reach, he met Marjorie Lynn Noe, a younger woman reserved outside the entertainment world, and unlike Dodie, not a guiding figure. In Marjorie, Landon saw what he had always lacked: the possibility of a family life built on ordinary foundations, without the need to prove or defend itself. They married in 1963, when Landon had already become a familiar face on American television. This marriage unfolded alongside Bonanza's peak years, and therefore carried the tempo of a rising star's life: a relentless shooting schedule, growing professional responsibilities, and constant public attention. Marjorie stepped into the role of wife within a household whose center was perpetually pulled toward the set. 4 children were born in succession, turning the home into a crowded, busy, noisy space, matching the image of a large family Landon had long yearned for since childhood. Outwardly, the image of Bonanza's father increasingly aligned with his private life. Landon was the financial pillar, the decision-maker, the axis around which everything revolved. Inwardly, pressure accumulated in ways less visible. Marjorie carried most of the domestic burden as her husband was continually absent. Landon carried an obsession with controlling both his work and his home, a reflex shaped by years of earlier instability. The distance did not come from a single incident, but from a prolonged misalignment between one person constantly being pulled forward and another forced to keep everything still. When Little House on the Prairie was born, Landon's creative power reached an unprecedented level. He did not simply work more. He brought the work home in the form of psychological tension and an absolute need to justify his choices. Marjorie, already outside the entertainment world, grew increasingly estranged from that rhythm of life. The conflicts did not require raised voices to take shape. Loneliness within a household full of children, the feeling of being eclipsed by a husband's career, and a marriage in which dialogue became steadily rarer. The marriage, which lasted nearly 2 decades, ended in 1982, just as Little House was entering its final phase. This collapse did not come with public drama, but it left deep wounds in the children and a visible crack in the image of the ideal father the public had come to know. For Landon, it was the second time he watched his family fall apart while holding everything he had once dreamed of: fame, power, material stability. That sense of failure did not make him stop. It propelled him toward another choice, closer, more intense, and ultimately more controversial than anything he had experienced before. Before the fractures left by the second marriage had time to settle, a new connection formed within Michael Landon's familiar workplace, the space where he had always controlled rhythm and emotion. Cindy Clerico entered his life not as a fan or an equal colleague, but as a makeup artist working directly with him on set. Through daily proximity, witnessing the relentless pace of labor and the rare silences between takes, Cindy moved into Landon's inner life at a moment when he was exhausted by collapse and longing for a connection that required no lengthy explanations. The relationship developed in a gray zone, where the boundary between work and private life was stretched thin. When the affair was discovered, the shock did not fall only on Landon's family. It rippled through a collective that had long viewed him as a moral pillar. The hurt felt by those around him, especially his children and longtime bonds on set, turned a personal choice into a public event, forcing Landon to confront the distance between the image he had built and the action he had taken. In that storm, Cindy stood beside him, not as a symbol, but as a decisive choice. They married in 1983. Unlike his previous marriages, Landon entered this one with a determination to correct what he believed he had done wrong. He reversed a prior vasectomy to have children, placing the new family at the center of his priorities. 2 children were born, introducing a different rhythm to a man accustomed to controlling shooting schedules and storylines. Cindy organized domestic life while Landon continued to work without pause. That stability created a sense of calm he had been seeking since very early on. Even so, cracks from the past did not vanish simply because of a new beginning. Old relationships were deeply wounded. Distance persisted with people who had once regarded him as a model. Public pressure did not ease. It changed form, shifting from admiration to judgment. As the third wife, Cindy became the focus of rumors and unspoken tension, while Landon tried to balance protecting his present family with responsibilities toward children from previous marriages. When illness struck in 1991, the relationship faced its most severe test. Cindy remained at his side through treatment decisions and daily routines, becoming a direct anchor as his body weakened rapidly. Yet misunderstandings within the family regarding visits left wounds that were not easily healed, casting his final weeks in a sense of separation. Between care and strain, their love existed in a state both close and burdened by what had gone unresolved. A relationship born of a decisive choice, carrying a cost both would bear to the very end. Those unresolved tensions were soon overtaken by a harsher order that allowed no delay. Early in 1991, Michael Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, a disease often discovered only at a late stage. The news landed like a final compression on a body long accustomed to operating beyond its limits. In a short time, he lost weight rapidly, his strength visibly drained. But his first choice was not to withdraw from the public eye. Landon appeared before the media, disclosed his condition openly, and maintained a calm, controlled tone, a familiar reflex of a man who had always set the pace of his own story. The months that followed unfolded under a dense treatment schedule. Chemotherapy, experimental options, days of violent physical reaction followed by brief lulls. Landon narrowed the world around him, spending most of his time with his present family, while striving to remain lucid enough to make his own decisions. Decline came faster than expected, widening the gap between will and physical capacity. Within that contraction, a quiet tragedy formed out of family misunderstandings. Visitation was limited by misinformation, leaving some of his children absent during the final weeks. When the truth emerged, time did not wait to be repaired. Cheryl, the daughter with whom he shared a particularly close bond, carried a lasting remorse for realizing too late. In the final days, his children gathered one by one. The room was not loud. Silences lasted longer than words. Strength ebbed away, yet clarity remained enough to recognize each face. The farewell was brief, needing no explanation, closing a life that had moved too quickly. "It's time. I love you all." No elaborate ritual, only the full presence of family in a moment that could not be prolonged. In July 1991, Michael Landon died at the age of 54. A private funeral was held, attended by about 500 people, away from the lights he had stood beneath for 3 decades. America responded with tributes from prominent figures, Ronald Reagan spoke of the battle with illness that had touched the nation's heart and of Landon's unyielding spirit. From a closer vantage point, Melissa Gilbert remembered Landon not as a seamless symbol, but as a complex human being, contradictory, flawed yet kind, and principled in his own way. A memory not flattened to make him easy to love, but kept intact with the sharp edges that had made him who he was. His passing came too early, but it did not diminish Michael Landon's legacy. If anything, it forced a clearer reckoning with an imprint deeply embedded in the structure of American television. For 3 decades, Landon did more than appear on screen. He shaped how family stories were told to millions, where morality was not proclaimed through slogans, but tested through choices. From Bonanza to Little House on the Prairie and Highway to Heaven, he reframed the model of the central man, power bound to responsibility, compassion inseparable from discipline, and kindness subjected to the pressures of real life. His approach to writing and staging, measured pacing, character-first priorities, avoidance of sensationalism, became a standard for family television for decades. Replayed worldwide through syndication and lodged in the collective memory as a shared language of weekend evenings. That influence lies not only in episode counts or audience size, but in Landon's proof that a television auteur could command the full creative chain without losing a mass audience. He drew clear moral boundaries for the worlds he created, accepted controversy to protect a value axis, and was willing to end decisively when he felt a story was no longer honest with itself. The contradictions, mistakes, and fractures of his private life were not erased by fame. They existed alongside the work, giving the legacy human weight rather than the smoothness of a monument. Michael Landon was known to audiences by many images: the dashing little Joe of Bonanza, the exemplary Father Charles Ingalls, or the wandering angel of Highway to Heaven. But if one were to name the man himself, he might best be called a storyteller of morality, someone who used mass television to converse with pain, belief, and the fragility of ordinary people. Each series he created was not merely entertainment, but a slice of life where poverty, loss, error, and forgiveness coexist within a frame that does not look away. When his episodes are still switched on in quiet living rooms, amid a television landscape that has grown louder and colder, viewers can still feel the warmth of a narrative voice that believed in people. Not naive optimism, but a faith tempered by domestic violence, bullying, failed marriages, illness, and the nearness of death. Landon's television did not promise easy salvation. It reminded us that people may fall, yet still have the right to stand again with dignity. Michael Landon does not endure because he was perfect. He is remembered because he dared to place his heart, light and shadow alike, on the screen without shielding it. And perhaps that is why, many years after he left, those stories remain, quietly asking each viewer, in the hardest choices of your own life, what will you choose to keep? Do you remember a moment on screen from Michael Landon that once made you pause and think? Share your feelings in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue this journey exploring lives that are both radiant and fragile in the world of art.